Right now, somewhere in a hospital, a person presses a small button. A machine beeps, and within minutes, the pain fades. We take this for granted. But for most of human history, that button did not exist. There were no machines, no pills, no needles, no emergency rooms glowing bright in the dark. For hundreds of thousands of years, when pain came, humans faced it with nothing but their hands, their plants, their words, and each other. And here is the thing that will surprise you. They were not helpless, not even close. What ancient people knew about pain, how to soften it, how to survive it, how to make meaning from it, is one of the most quietly astonishing stories in all of human history. And much of it has been lost, buried under centuries of modern medicine that arrived so fast, so recently, that we forgot everything that came before. Tonight we are going back to find it. We are going to walk through the forests and caves and river valleys where your ancestors lived. We are going to sit beside their fires. We are going to learn what they reached for when their bodies hurt. Some of it will sound strange. Some of it will make you think. And some of it you will recognize deep in your own bones. Because the tools they used, the touch, the warmth, the story, the breath, are still inside you right now. The history of how humans dealt with pain is really the history of how humans took care of each other. And that story is much older, much richer, and much more tender than you might expect. If you are listening to this to fall asleep, that is exactly why I make these videos. Subscribe if you would like more slow journeys into the deep past, and leave a comment telling me where in the world you are right now, what city, what time, what the sky looks like outside your window. I check every single one. It never gets old. Now, let us begin. The wound that shaped everything. Imagine a morning 50,000 years ago. The air smells like pine and damp earth. Somewhere nearby, a river moves slow and dark through the trees. A small group of people are waking up around the last of a fire. One of them is not moving well. He hurt his leg yesterday. A fall, a sharp rock, something that tore the skin and bruised deep into the muscle. He cannot walk without limping. His face is tight with the effort of not showing how much it hurts. Someone sees it. An older woman comes to him. She kneels. She does not say much. She places both hands gently on his leg and presses, slowly, in a way that seems to know where the hurt lives. He exhales. Something in that exhale tells us everything about what humans learned to do with pain long before medicine existed. Pain is the oldest story the human body tells. It is older than language, older than tools. The experience of hurting and the desperate need to make it stop is so ancient and so universal that it shaped entire cultures, entire belief systems, entire ways of understanding what it means to be alive. And yet, for most of the time humans have walked this earth, there were no doctors, no pharmacies, no laboratories studying which compounds block which receptors. There was only the world around them, the plants, the heat, the cold, the hands, the voice, the fire. What they discovered in that world through millions of small experiments across hundreds of thousands of years turns out to be remarkably sophisticated. Some of it we now understand through modern science. Some of it we still cannot fully explain. And some of it was simply the accumulated wisdom of people who had no choice but to pay very close attention to what worked. Archaeologists have found evidence of pain management practices going back at least 70,000 years, possibly much longer. Caves in South Africa have yielded deposits of plants with known medicinal properties, carefully gathered and stored. Skeletal remains from the Middle East show surgical procedures on bone that required keeping a patient still and somehow calm for extended periods of time. Think about what that means. These were people without hospitals, without anesthesia, without sterile conditions. And yet they were performing procedures that should have been impossible. They managed, because they had things we have mostly forgotten how to use. The first of those things was heat. Fire as the first medicine. There is almost no culture in human history that did not use heat to ease pain. Not one. From the tribes of the Amazon to the ancient Egyptians, from the Ice Age hunters of Siberia to the Aboriginal peoples of Australia. Everywhere humans have lived, they have held warmth against their hurting bodies. This is not coincidence. This is biology so deep it predates our species. When you press something warm against a sore muscle, heat receptors in your skin activate. They send signals along certain nerve pathways. And here is the remarkable thing. Those signals travel along some of the same routes that pain signals use. They essentially compete with each other. The warmth arrives in the brain and crowds out some of the pain. Your ancient ancestors did not know any of this. They could not explain it in those words. But they felt it. They noticed it. And they used it for hundreds of thousands of years. Hot stones wrapped in leaves were pressed against aching joints. Warm mud was packed around swollen feet. Bodies were positioned close to fire, not just for warmth against the cold, but because something about the heat made the pain quieter. In ancient Egypt, papyrus scrolls from around 1550 BCE, one of the oldest medical documents we have, describe the use of heated tools applied to wounds to stop bleeding and ease pain. This is one of the earliest written records of pain management in existence. But the practice itself is far older than writing. In China, the practice of moxibustion developed over thousands of years. It involves burning dried plant material, usually mugwort, very close to specific points on the skin. The heat goes deep. The earliest written records of it are from around the 3rd century BCE, but the underlying practice likely stretches back much further, into a time before anyone wrote anything down. Across the Americas, indigenous peoples used heated stones placed in water to create steam baths and sweat lodges. These were not just rituals, though they were deeply ritualistic. They were understood clearly and practically as places where the body could heal, where pain could be released. The combination of heat, steam, and often medicinal plants added to the water created an environment that eased muscle pain, joint pain, respiratory pain, and the pain that lives not in the body but in the mind. The thermal baths of ancient Rome, the hammams of the ancient Arab world, the Finnish sauna tradition that stretches back thousands of years. All of them are expressions of the same ancient discovery. Heat heals, or more precisely, heat softens. It does not fix the broken thing, but it makes the broken thing quieter. It lets you breathe. It creates a moment where the pain steps back just enough for rest to come in. And rest, as ancient healers understood intuitively, is when the real healing happens. Cold came second in the ancient toolkit. Ice pressed against a fresh injury. Cold river water flowing over a sprained ankle. The surprising relief of something frozen held against a burning wound. Modern medicine explains this too. Cold constricts blood vessels. It slows the chemical signals that amplify inflammation. It numbs the surface nerves. Ancient people knew none of that. They only knew it worked. In ancient Greece, Hippocrates, the man often called the father of medicine, wrote about using cold water in treatments around 400 BCE. But again, the actual practice is far older. Cave paintings and burial sites in cold climates show evidence of people using snow and ice in ways that suggest deliberate application to injured areas. Heat and cold, the simplest tools in the world, and the oldest. The remarkable thing is not that ancient people discovered them. The remarkable thing is how completely they understood them. They used heat for chronic pain, for deep aching, for old injuries, for the cold stiffness that crept into joints with age. They used cold for fresh wounds, for swelling, for the sharp new pain of impact and injury. They had figured out, without any science at all, the difference between acute and chronic pain management. And they had barely started. The plant healers walk into any ancient forest, and you are walking through a pharmacy. This is not a metaphor. This is biology. Plants have been producing chemical compounds for hundreds of millions of years. Some of those compounds evolved to defend the plant against insects or disease. Others attract pollinators, but many of them, by chemical accident or by some deeper logic we do not fully understand, interact with the human nervous system in ways that ease pain. Ancient people found them, not by studying chemistry, but by watching, tasting, observing, and carefully passing down what they learned across generations. The willow tree is perhaps the most famous example. For thousands of years, people across Europe, Asia, and the Americas chewed willow bark. They boiled it into tea. They ground it and applied it to wounds. Ancient Egyptian medical papyri mention it. Hippocrates prescribed it for fever and pain. Native American tribes from dozens of different regions, with no contact with each other or with European traditions, independently discovered the same thing. Willow bark works. It contains salicin. When you consume salicin, your body converts it into salicylic acid, which is chemically almost identical to aspirin. We did not invent aspirin in 1897. We isolated and synthesized the compound that humans had been using for at least 5,000 years, possibly much longer. Think about the scale of that continuity. Your ancient ancestor in pain, sitting by a river, stripping bark from a willow tree, was doing something that connected directly across an enormous span of time to the white pill you might take for a headache today. The molecule is almost the same. Only the packaging changed. But willow bark was only the beginning. Across the world, ancient healers developed botanical knowledge that took millennia to accumulate and is still being mapped and studied by modern scientists. In South America, the coca plant, whose leaves contain cocaine, was used by Andean peoples for thousands of years as a painkiller, a stimulant, and a sacred medicine. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the 16th century, they found entire civilizations that had integrated the plant into medicine, ritual, and daily life with extraordinary sophistication. The leaf was chewed. It numbed the mouth. It reduced hunger. It eased the pain of altitude sickness and hard labor. Modern anesthetic surgery, which began in the 19th century, built directly on the chemical properties of this plant. In Asia, opium poppies have been cultivated for at least 5,000 years. Sumerian clay tablets from around 3,400 BCE refer to the poppy as the joy plant. Ancient Egyptian doctors used it. Greek physicians wrote about it at length. The pain-relieving properties of opium are so powerful, so effective, that the chemical compounds it contains, the opioids, remain among the most potent painkillers in the world today. They are also profoundly dangerous. Ancient healers understood this too. They used opium carefully, with ceremony, with dosing knowledge passed down through apprenticeship, not always successfully, but with a degree of informed caution that is genuinely remarkable, given that they had no pharmacology, no chemical analysis, no clinical trials. Across Southeast Asia and the Pacific, clove plants were used for toothache. The active compound, eugenol, is still used in dentistry today. It is literally in the materials some dentists use in their offices right now. In the Amazon, curare, derived from plants, was used on arrow tips. It paralyzes muscles. Modern surgeons use synthetic versions of its active compound to relax muscles during operations. On and on it goes. Ginger for nausea and inflammatory pain. Turmeric for swelling. Arnica applied to bruises. Comfrey for broken bones, earning it the folk name knitbone. Valerian for sleep and pain-related anxiety. St. John's wort for mood and nerve pain. Chamomile for cramps and digestive pain. Almost every culture in the ancient world developed deep botanical knowledge. This knowledge was not random or primitive. It was the product of sustained, careful, generational observation and experiment. When a plant healer in ancient Mesopotamia prescribed a specific herb, they were drawing on a tradition that might stretch back centuries. The knowledge had been tested, refined. The failures had been noted and discarded. The successes had been kept and taught. The Ebers Papyrus, that Egyptian medical document from around 1550 BCE, lists over 800 remedies. Many of them are plant-based. Many of them involve real active compounds that modern chemists can identify and verify. This is not folklore. This is empirical medicine developed without microscopes, without chemistry labs, without any of the tools we assume are necessary for medical knowledge. And there is something even older. In the Shanidar cave, in what is now Iraq, archaeologists discovered the burial of a Neanderthal man. He had been buried roughly 60,000 years ago. And around his body, analysis suggested the presence of pollen from multiple plant species, including yarrow, groundsel, and ephedra, all of which have known medicinal or pain-relieving properties, all of which are still used in traditional medicine today, 60,000 years ago, before our species even fully arrived in that region, before language as we understand it, before anything we would recognize as civilization, and someone was already using medicinal plants. The details of that burial remain debated by archaeologists. The pollen could have arrived in other ways. But the finding sits there quietly, refusing to be entirely dismissed, because it fits so perfectly with everything else we know about how ancient humans related to pain and healing. They watched, they learned, they remembered, and they cared for each other with everything the living world around them had to offer. Hands that knew where it hurt. Here is something you have felt, but probably never thought about. When you hurt yourself, your first instinct is to touch it. You bang your knee and your hands go straight there. You get a headache and your fingers press your temples. A child scrapes her hand and holds it tight to her chest. We do not think about this, we just do it. This is not a habit, it is biology. It is tens of thousands of years of human discovery compressed into a single reflex. Touch, especially deliberate therapeutic touch, is one of the most ancient and effective pain interventions that exists. And ancient peoples figured this out in remarkable detail. What we now call massage has roots stretching back at least 5,000 years, and almost certainly much further. The oldest written medical texts from China, India, Egypt, and Greece all include detailed descriptions of manual techniques for relieving pain. The Huangdi Neijing, one of the foundational texts of traditional Chinese medicine, was compiled around 200 BCE, but draws on traditions far older. It describes specific hand techniques for different kinds of pain: where to press, how deep, in what direction, for how long. In ancient India, Ayurvedic medicine developed Abhyanga, a full-body oil massage technique, as a central medical practice. Not a luxury, not a comfort ritual. A treatment for pain, disease, exhaustion, and illness. The specific oils used, sesame, coconut, herbal infusions, were selected based on the type of pain being treated. In ancient Greece, Hippocrates himself wrote that physicians should be skilled in rubbing. He described manual techniques for joints, muscles, and even internal conditions. His prescriptions for massage are specific and practical. They read across thousands of years, like the notes of someone who had seen it work. But all of these written traditions were building on something even older. In small hunter-gatherer bands, the oldest form of social structure humans ever lived in, touch was constant. People slept pressed together. Grooming each other was a daily activity, serving both hygiene and social bonding. Children were carried and held for years. Physical closeness was not optional. It was survival. And in that context, the discovery that certain kinds of touch eased pain was inevitable. Someone with a sore back was leaned against. Someone with an aching shoulder was rubbed. An elder with stiff joints had those joints moved gently, slowly, in ways that helped. Over time, across generations, some people became particularly skilled at this. They learned where to press. They learned how hard and how soft. They learned the difference between a knot in a muscle and a bruise in the bone. They developed techniques that were passed from hand to hand, from teacher to student, across centuries. This is the origin of every massage therapist, every physiotherapist, every osteopath, every chiropractor who practices today. Not in the clinic, in the ancient camp, in the hands of someone who simply knew how to help. There is a chemical story here too. When skin is pressed and muscles are manipulated, the body releases endorphins. These are natural pain-blocking compounds that your body produces internally. They are related to the same molecular family as opium. They are your body's own painkiller. Touch triggers their release. So does exercise, laughter, certain foods, orgasm, and social connection. Your body is designed to reduce its own pain through these mechanisms. Ancient healers did not know about endorphins, but they knew that touch helped. They knew it consistently, across cultures, across centuries, across continents, separated by entire oceans. That kind of consistency is not accident. It is truth that kept proving itself. There is another element to the touch story that is even more subtle. Ancient healers used pressure points. In Chinese medicine, the system of acupuncture developed over thousands of years. It maps specific points on the body where needles or pressure or heat applied to certain spots can ease pain in other places. A point on the hand relieves headache. A point on the foot eases lower back pain. The map is elaborate, counterintuitive, and deeply specific. Modern science has complicated and debated acupuncture for decades. Some studies find it works better than placebo. Some find it does not. The mechanism is not fully understood. But something real may be happening at the neurological level. A kind of interruption or redirection of pain signals through the nervous system. What matters for our story is this. People discovered these pressure point effects empirically, through touching bodies in pain and noticing what happened. And they built entire medical systems around those observations. Whatever the full explanation turns out to be, the observation was real. The pain did ease. And the human body had learned, through touch, to cooperate with its own healing. Words, stories, and the mind's power over pain. Here is something that modern neuroscience has now confirmed, clearly and repeatedly. What you believe about pain changes how much it hurts. This is not weakness. This is not imagination. This is the brain doing what it evolved to do. The brain is not a passive receiver of pain signals. It is an active interpreter. It decides how much of those signals to amplify and how much to quiet down, based on context, expectation, belief, and meaning. Ancient healers knew this. They did not know the word neuroscience. They did not understand neural pathways or the descending pain modulation system. But they understood that the right words, spoken by the right person at the right moment, could change how much someone hurt. And they used this knowledge with remarkable sophistication. In almost every ancient healing tradition, the healer was not just a person who gave you a plant or applied heat to your body. They were a storyteller, a ritualist, a person who could reach into the meaning of your pain and offer you a different way to understand it. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the earliest cradles of civilization, medical texts describe pain treatment that combines physical remedies with spoken incantations. The healer would apply a poultice to a wound while reciting specific words. The words were not magic, they were medicine. They created a context in which the patient could believe in healing. And belief, as the brain now confirms, reduces pain signals. This is not primitive superstition. This is applied neuroscience, practiced thousands of years before anyone knew what neurons were. In ancient Greece, the temples of Asclepius, the god of medicine, were places where the sick and suffering came to sleep, to dream, and to receive healing visions. Patients would prepare through ritual, bathing, fasting, prayer. They would sleep in the sacred halls while priests watched over them. Upon waking, they would describe their dreams. The priests would interpret those dreams as guidance for treatment. This practice, called incubation, worked. Not always, not for everyone, but well enough that these temples operated for centuries and drew patients from across the ancient world, including educated people, wealthy people, people with access to the best physicians of their time. They came to sleep in the temple and dream their way toward healing. What was actually happening? The ritual preparation lowered anxiety. The expectation of healing was established by everything around them. The sacred architecture, the trained priests, the stories of others who had been healed, the ceremony of the whole thing. Anxious patients in pain, placed in an environment designed to create safety, expectation of healing, and deep rest, experienced reductions in their pain. The brain interpreted this as healing from the god. But the brain's own pain regulation systems were doing the actual work. The ritual was the trigger. This is not so different from modern medicine. Placebo effect which is real and measurable, works through exactly this same mechanism. What you believe about a treatment changes how your brain processes the experience of pain. Doctors in clinical settings wear white coats, speak with authority, and create rituals of examination and prescription that are designed, even if unconsciously, to create exactly this effect. The same effect that the priests of Asclepius were deliberately engineering 3,000 years ago. Storytelling was another tool that worked through the same pathway. Pain is worse when it feels meaningless. When you cannot explain why it is happening. When you cannot see it as part of a larger narrative. When it feels like pure, random suffering with no end and no purpose. It is experienced as more intense, more distressing, more overwhelming. Ancient healers understood this intuitively. A healer in a hunter-gatherer community who came to tend a patient would often tell stories while working. Stories about others who had suffered this kind of pain and survived. Stories that placed the current suffering in a context, gave it meaning, connected it to the larger cycles of life and healing. The pain became part of something. It was not just noise anymore. It had a shape that could be understood and survived. Modern research into pain psychology confirms this over and over. Patients in pain who are given explanations for their pain, who understand what is happening and why, consistently report lower pain intensity than patients who receive the same physical treatment without explanation. The narrative changes the experience. The ancient healer sitting beside a patient, talking softly, telling stories, explaining the nature of the injury in whatever framework their culture provided, was doing something real, something measurable, something that worked. Ritual and the sacred space of healing. In ancient cultures, healing was never purely physical. This is perhaps the largest difference between ancient and modern medicine, and it is worth slowing down to really understand it. Today, we draw a sharp line between the body and the mind, between the physical and the psychological, between medicine and spirituality. When your back hurts, you go to a doctor. You do not go to a priest or a shaman or a storyteller. We have separated these things. Ancient peoples did not make that separation. For them, pain was always both a physical event and a spiritual one. A wound in the body was also an event in the invisible world. Healing required attending to both. This is not naive. It is, in some ways, more sophisticated than our current approach, because the mind-body connection that ancient traditions assumed is now extensively documented in modern research. Stress makes pain worse. Anxiety makes pain worse. Loneliness makes pain worse. Meaning, hope, connection, belief, and social support all measurably reduce pain. Ancient healing rituals addressed all of these dimensions simultaneously. The sweat lodge ceremony of many North American indigenous peoples is a beautiful example. A person in pain enters a small, dark, enclosed space. It is hot. Steam rises from heated stones. The healer or ceremony leader sings specific songs. Those present pray or chant together. The ceremony has a structure, a beginning, middle, and end. It has meaning that the participants understand and share. What is happening on a physical level is real. The heat loosens muscles. The steam opens airways. The sweating may help clear certain compounds from the body. But what is happening on a psychological and social level is equally real. The person in pain is held literally and figuratively by their community. They are engaged in a practice with ancient roots, connected to all the people who have done this before them. The ritual creates certainty and safety. The shared belief of everyone present that healing is possible creates a collective expectation that the brain of the person in pain absorbs and uses. The same logic applied in the healing ceremonies of ancient Egypt, which combined temple sleep with herbal medicine and ritual prayer. In ancient Greek medicine, which combined physical treatment with music, poetry, and philosophical discussion. In the healing practices of ancient China, which combined acupuncture, herbal medicine, and deliberate breathing practices with practices that acknowledged the mental and spiritual dimensions of suffering. Across all of these traditions, one element appears consistently. The healer was not just technically skilled, they were trustworthy. The relationship between healer and patient was central to the healing itself, not because of magic or placebo in any dismissive sense, but because trust reduces cortisol. Trust lowers anxiety. Trust allows the body to shift from the physiological state of threat and protection, which amplifies pain, to the state of safety and rest, which allows the pain modulation systems to function properly. Ancient peoples built elaborate structures to create and maintain this trust. The healer's training was long and rigorous. Their authority was acknowledged by the whole community. Their approach to the patient combined competence with compassion in ways that made the patient feel genuinely held and cared for. A Siberian shaman who danced and drummed through the night over a patient in pain was not deluding anyone. They were deploying, through ritual, the full range of psychological tools that reduce pain. Community presence, certainty of action, rhythmic sound that regulates the nervous system, the patient's absorption into something larger than their own suffering. That it looked nothing like a modern hospital does not make it less effective. It makes it different. And different does not mean wrong. Sound, rhythm, and the body's response. This might be the oldest painkiller that exists. Rhythm. Long before willow bark, long before acupuncture, before the first fire was pressed against an aching joint, there was rhythm, and the human body was designed to respond to it. Drumming at certain frequencies physically alters brainwave patterns. A drum beaten at roughly 4 to 8 beats per second brings the brain into theta state, the same state associated with deep meditation, hypnagogic dreaming, and the moments just before sleep. In theta state, pain perception decreases. The body relaxes. The fight or flight response quiets down. Ancient shamanic traditions around the world, many of which have been practiced continuously for tens of thousands of years, use drumming at exactly these frequencies. Not because ancient people studied brainwaves, but because they felt what happened. They noticed that when the drum was beaten in a certain way, people calmed. People whose bodies were tense with pain began to breathe more slowly. The quality of suffering changed. Singing has similar effects. In almost every ancient culture, lullabies were used for sick children, not just to distract them. The vibration of a voice close to the body creates physical resonance in the chest and throat. It activates the vagus nerve, the long wandering nerve that connects the brain to nearly every major organ in the body. Vagal activation slows heart rate, deepens breathing, and reduces the physiological state that makes pain worse. Your body literally responds to a human voice singing softly near you. It has done this since before we were fully human. Mother mammals vocalize to their injured young. The response is ancient. The response is real. In ancient Greece, music was considered a medical treatment. Physicians prescribed listening to specific kinds of music for specific conditions. Pythagoras, the mathematician, developed entire theories about how different musical intervals affected the body and mind. Some of his prescriptions were specific. This mode for grief and pain. That mode for anxiety. This rhythm for fatigue. We might smile at that now. But functional MRI studies of the brain during music listening show that music activates the brain's reward system and pain regulation circuits simultaneously. Listening to music you find beautiful genuinely reduces the subjective experience of pain. It is not just distraction, it is neurological interference. In Aboriginal Australian traditions, which are among the oldest continuous cultural traditions on Earth, the didgeridoo is used in healing ceremonies. The drone of the instrument, very low and sustained, creates vibrations that healers apply to specific areas of the body. Patients describe feeling the sound physically inside their tissues. This is not unlike the physical therapy technique called therapeutic ultrasound, in which specific sound frequencies are applied to soft tissue to promote healing and reduce pain. The mechanism is similar. The delivery is thousands of years apart. Music was used in ancient Mesopotamia, in ancient Egypt, in ancient India, in ancient China, all as medical treatment. Not as entertainment that happened to make sick people feel better, as deliberate medicine prescribed with the same seriousness as herbal remedies. Chanting and prayer also work through these pathways. When people chant together, whether a Buddhist monk in silent contemplation, a group of indigenous people in ceremony, or a medieval European congregation in hymn, several things happen. Breathing becomes synchronized. Heart rates entrain toward coherence. The shared rhythm creates a neurological state that reduces individual suffering and amplifies the sense of collective support. Pain held alone in silence is one thing. Pain held inside a circle of voices rising and falling together is another. The second one is survivable in ways the first often is not. Ancient healing ceremonies understood this. They built community sound into treatment not as spiritual decoration, but as functional medicine. Sleep and rest as medicine. In the modern world, sleep is something we sacrifice. We stay up late, we wake up early. We answer messages at midnight. We treat sleep as a luxury, as dead time, as something to minimize in service of productivity. Ancient peoples knew better. Across almost every ancient medical tradition, directed rest and sleep were considered among the most powerful healing tools available. Not because they did not have better options, because they had observed carefully and over a long time what rest actually does. When you sleep, your brain does something remarkable. It shifts the flow of cerebrospinal fluid through its own tissues. The glymphatic system, only properly described by scientists in 2013, essentially washes waste products out of brain tissue during deep sleep. One of those waste products is adenosine, a compound that builds up with inflammation and contributes to the heavy, foggy quality of pain. Deep sleep also triggers the release of growth hormone, which drives tissue repair throughout the body. It regulates cortisol, which is a stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, amplifies pain signals. It allows the immune system to perform maintenance and repair work that cannot happen while the body is in an active, alert state. Ancient peoples could not have known any of this, but they observed the outcomes. A wounded person who slept deeply healed faster. A person in pain who was helped to rest deeply woke with the pain somewhat diminished. Over many generations, this observation became embedded in healing traditions everywhere. In the temples of Asclepius in ancient Greece, the entire healing protocol was built around sleep. Patients prepared for days, then were guided into deep, ritually structured sleep in the sacred precincts of the temple. The preparation, the ritual, the sacred context, all were designed to enable the deepest possible rest. In ancient China, one of the foundational concepts in traditional medicine is the idea that qi, life energy, repairs and renews during rest and sleep. The prescription of adequate sleep in specific positions at specific times of day is part of classical Chinese medical texts. In Ayurvedic medicine from ancient India, dinacharya, the ideal daily routine, includes specific recommendations about sleep timing and duration that are remarkably close to what modern chronobiologists now recommend for optimal health and pain management. Ancient healers developed herbal preparations specifically to support sleep: valerian root, passion flower, hops, lavender, chamomile, lemon balm. These plants contain compounds that genuinely help initiate and deepen sleep through their effects on GABA receptors in the brain. People were using them for this purpose thousands of years before any scientist understood why they worked. Darkness was managed carefully. Many ancient healing traditions placed recovering patients in dim or darkened spaces. Modern research confirms that darkness is essential for the production of melatonin, which orchestrates the body's repair processes during sleep. Ancient healers knew this too, in practice, if not in chemistry. The ancient world also understood the healing power of the in-between state, the place between sleep and waking. In many shamanic traditions, the healer induces a specific altered state in the patient that is not quite sleep and not quite normal waking consciousness. Drumming, chanting, specific plant medicines, breathing techniques, darkness, warmth, all of these can bring a person to this liminal state where the normal defenses of the conscious mind are relaxed and the pain regulation systems of the brain can operate more freely. This state, which modern researchers call hypnagogia, is associated with reduced pain, reduced anxiety, and sometimes genuine insight into the psychological dimensions of suffering. It is the state in which ancient healers claimed to receive visions and where patients sometimes experienced spontaneous relief. We do not fully understand it, but it is real. It is reliably induced by the techniques ancient healers developed, and the relief it produces is measurable. Sleep was not passive waiting for ancient healers. It was medicine. Active, directed, protected medicine. And they defended it with the full toolkit of sound, heat, herbs, ritual, and community support. The healer in the community. Not everyone became a healer. In most ancient societies, the person who tended to pain and injury held a specific role. They were recognized, they were trained, they were trusted. And the nature of their training and their role tells us a great deal about how ancient people understood pain and healing. In hunter-gatherer societies, which is how humans lived for 95% of our history, the healer was often also the person with the deepest knowledge of the local plants, the most developed skills in reading the body, and the ability to create the mental and emotional conditions that helped people heal. These roles were not gender-specific. Evidence from graves and archaeological sites suggests that healers in prehistoric communities could be women or men, young or old. What they shared was not gender or age, but specific knowledge. The kind of knowledge that took years to accumulate and required a particular kind of attentive, empathic personality to apply. In many traditions, the healer's training began in childhood. They were identified early, sometimes by personality traits that suggested the right disposition, empathy, patience, unusual observational skills. They were apprenticed to an existing healer. They learned by watching, by assisting, by slowly taking on more responsibility over years. By the time they were practicing on their own, they had seen hundreds of cases. They had an accumulated pattern recognition that no textbook could provide. This apprenticeship model is fundamentally different from modern medical education, but it is not inferior. Modern medicine is better at understanding mechanisms, but ancient apprenticeship produced healers who were extraordinarily skilled at reading the specific person in front of them, at understanding the particular way this patient's pain expressed itself, at knowing what kind of touch, what kind of words, what kind of ritual environment would help this specific human being. One of the things lost in modern medicine is this specificity, the treatment of the individual rather than the diagnosis. In ancient China, a physician's skill was measured partly by their ability to perceive subtle differences between apparently similar patients. Two people with what looked like the same condition would receive different treatments based on the healer's reading of their particular expression of imbalance. This was not imprecision. It was a profound attentiveness to individual variation that modern medicine is only beginning to recover through personalized medicine. Ancient healers also knew the limits of their tools. They knew there were pains they could soften but not eliminate, injuries that would take a long time to heal no matter what was done, conditions that would eventually end in death despite everything. And they developed practices for these situations too. The management of terminal pain, what we now call palliative care, was taken seriously in many ancient traditions. The goal was not to pretend that death was not coming, but to make the time before it as bearable as possible. To surround the dying person with presence, warmth, story, music, and whatever plant medicines could ease the final suffering. In many cultures, the healer's role at the end of life was considered the most important of all. To hold someone's hand as they died, to speak the words that helped them understand where they were going, to make sure they did not face the last pain alone. This is medicine too, ancient medicine, and it is something that modern palliative care is slowly, imperfectly relearning. The things they knew that we forgot. Here is the uncomfortable truth at the center of this story. Modern medicine is extraordinary. It saves lives that ancient healers could not have saved. It fixes things that ancient people died from. The antibiotics alone have probably saved more lives than every other medical advance in human history combined. And yet, in some things, ancient healers were ahead of where we are now. Not in all things, not most things. But in some specific, important things, the ancient world understood pain and healing in ways that modern medicine is only recently beginning to recover. The mind-body connection. Ancient healers never questioned it. Modern medicine spent most of the 20th century ignoring it. We are now having to relearn through controlled trials and neuroimaging what ancient healers knew from observing thousands of patients. The role of social connection in healing. Ancient medicine was practiced in community. The healer brought the community with them. Modern medicine moved healing into isolated hospital rooms and clinics. Loneliness is now recognized as a major factor in pain amplification, disease progression, and slower recovery. We are starting to bring community back into healthcare. Ancient healers never took it out. The therapeutic relationship. Ancient healers spent enormous time with each patient. The quality of the human relationship between healer and patient was understood as medicine itself. Modern healthcare systems reduce appointment times to minutes. The research now shows clearly that the quality of the patient-physician relationship has measurable effects on outcomes, including pain outcomes. We are rediscovering something ancient healers built their entire practice around: the use of ritual, ceremony, and meaning-making. Ancient healing created contexts in which pain could be understood as part of a larger story, in which suffering had meaning and location within the human experience. Modern medicine is largely silent on meaning. Patients with chronic pain often report that the absence of meaning and narrative around their condition is as distressing as the physical pain itself. Palliative care, integrative medicine, and trauma-informed approaches are all attempts to recover this ancient dimension of healing, the plants. This is perhaps the most concrete area of recovery. Modern pharmacology is, in many ways, a more sophisticated version of what ancient herbalists were doing. The World Health Organization estimates that around 25% of modern pharmaceutical drugs are derived from or modeled on plant compounds first identified in traditional medicine: aspirin from willow bark, digoxin for heart conditions from foxglove, vincristine, a powerful cancer drug, from the periwinkle plant. The list goes on and on. Ethnobotanists, scientists who study traditional plant knowledge, are now working to document ancient botanical healing knowledge before it disappears as the last remaining practitioners age and die. What they find is consistently humbling. Plant knowledge that was dismissed as superstition turns out, when tested properly, to contain real pharmacological activity. We dismissed it for decades. Now we are going back to find what we threw away. What lives in you tonight? You are lying in the dark right now. Maybe you are tired. Maybe something hurts. Maybe the day left a kind of weight behind that has no name but sits somewhere in your chest. You are not the first person who has ever felt this. The person who felt it 50,000 years ago was not so different from you. They had the same nervous system, the same pain signals running along the same pathways to the same brain, the same need for warmth, for touch, for the sound of a voice nearby, for the feeling that someone knew they were hurting and cared enough to help. What ancient people discovered about pain through hundreds of thousands of years of simply paying attention is not lost. Not entirely. It lives in the warmth you feel when you press a heating pad to sore muscles, in the relief that comes when someone you trust touches your shoulder, in the way a song that you love can shift your whole body's chemistry, in the particular ease that comes from being truly heard by another person, in the deep, restorative sleep that comes when you feel safe enough to let go. These are not small things. They are not alternative to real medicine. They are real medicine, ancient and modern, working through the same human biology that has not changed in tens of thousands of years. Your body still knows how to use them. The endorphins triggered by warmth and touch, the vagal activation from slow breathing and gentle sound, the pain modulation systems that respond to trust and safety, and the quiet certainty that you are not alone. Ancient healers could not stop all pain, neither can modern medicine. But they understood something essential about what pain needs. It needs to be acknowledged. It needs to be held in community. It needs to be given meaning. It needs warmth and touch and rest and the sound of a human voice. These things do not fix everything. Nothing does. But they make everything more survivable. And sometimes, in the right moment, they are enough to let the pain step back just enough, to let you breathe, to let the long, slow work of healing begin. The rest that comes. There is a healer sitting beside you right now, not in the room, not in any physical sense, but in the accumulated wisdom of every person who ever sat beside someone in pain and asked, "What do you need? What will help? How can I make this easier for you?" Every warm hand on a forehead, every fire built for comfort rather than just warmth, every song hummed in the dark to ease a child's crying, every healer who said, "This will pass. You will survive this. I have seen others survive this. You are not alone." All of that is still here. It lives in you, in your body's capacity to heal, in your nervous system's deep ancient ability to soften pain when the conditions are right, in your hunger for touch and warmth and story and rest. You do not have to earn rest tonight. You do not have to deserve it. Rest is medicine. It has always been medicine. The most ancient healers on earth understood this before anything else. So let your body begin the work that it knows how to do. Let your breathing slow. Let the weight of the day become something that does not need your attention anymore tonight. Let the warmth of wherever you are, the blanket, the bed, the particular temperature of right now be enough. The same stars that burned above every ancient healer and every person they ever tended are still up there tonight, even if you cannot see them from here, even if the clouds are thick or the city lights are bright. They are there. You are part of a very long line of humans who found ways to hold pain and survive it and care for each other in the middle of it. That line does not end with you. If you found something in tonight's story that stayed with you, consider subscribing so more of these slow journeys can find you when you need them. Leave a comment if you are still awake. Tell me where you are in the world tonight, what time it is, what the air feels like, and if you are already drifting, that is exactly right. The hunt can wait until morning. Tonight, you rest.